Dresden, a great, beautiful, and historic city so far barely touched by the war, believed by its inhabitants to be somehow inviolate, became, in the technical language of the experts, a severe case of overbombing.
We had so many refugees who had come from the Eastern Front that at this point the city had swollen to double its size. The only man we had in the city was a veterans hospital, was blind and crippled. The blind were trying to carry the cripples and they couldn't see their way. And some people who tried to walk along, they were pulled in by the fire. They all of a sudden disappeared right in front of you. There is such a draft in a firestorm like that. It's the most horrible thing. You have to save yourself or try to get as far away from the fire because the draft pulls you in.
Next day came the Americans, a Western demonstration of support for the Russians now less than 100 miles away. Over 1,300 flying fortresses to pound the ruins of a city.
The city was, of course, in flames, but after 3 days we had to go in and try to find the people and take them out of the ruins. And sometimes a wash basin full contained 9-10 people, because their size had shrunk to just a small amount. Was just couldn't believe that this was a whole person. And this picture is just terrible. I saw sometimes two people close together who maybe in despair had L, and was one tiny little figure.
In the center of the city, cordoned off from the survivors, they built great funeral pyres.
There was no time to dig individual graves. We had to make big mass graves. They tried to identify by jewelry or by belongings, but many people could not be identified. Later on the ruins you found inscription, Hans, are you alive? Martha, are you still in the ruins?
Industrial damage was slight. The railway was working again in 3 days. But over 100,000 died. Dresden was another monument to total war. The last Nazi newsreel the Germans saw. It features scratch units in action on the Eastern Front, on German soil. The slogans now play on sexual fear of the Red Hordes. The main propaganda weapon, stories of rape, stereotyped accounts backed by dubious pictures in which the corpses may for once be German. Tales of brutal and licentious soldiery told in the stock language of racial hatred, beasts, rape, animals, bestiality. Refugees from Germany's eastern provinces and the occupied territories. Families were separated, never to be reunited. Thousands died from drowning, thousands from shelling. The great German Reich was shrinking. The Germans coming home. On the Western Front, the Allied air forces ranged at will beyond the Rhine, paralyzing all movement in preparation for the final assault. With bombs, rockets, and cannon fire, they struck at bridges, railways, roads, at a single horse and cart.
It was my duty to tell Hitler that from the point of view of armaments, the war was lost. And I did it in several memorandums, and the harshest one was the 19th of March 45, in which I told him very bluntly, which nobody dared to tell, that the war will be finished within 4 or 6 weeks.
Hitler boasted of losses in infantry being made good by countless numbers of new units. He himself presented medals to his new recruits. What they lacked in experience, they made up for in National Socialist ardor. A young company runner reports how he carried weapons up to the front line.
Als der Russe näher an Lauern heranrückte, meine Aufgabe bestand darin, Meldungen zu den einzelnen Kompaniegefechtsständen.
His reward, an Iron Cross, second class.
Verpflegung in die Hauptkampflinie geschafft.
March the 24th, the Rhine crossing. Montgomery's last showpiece battle. Upstream, the Americans slipped across almost unopposed. The goal the field commanders had in mind, Berlin. Across the Rhine now, from the Dutch border to the Black Forest in the south, the Allied columns pushed on into the heart of Germany, through scenes that were the commonplace of war. Towns and villages that burned, as the towns and villages of Poland, France, Russia, Yugoslavia, and Greece had burned. But for these civilians, for the women and children who saw the war go past, there were no ghettos and no gas chambers. Only in some, a sense of anger.
The first time I have had hatred against Hitler and the Nazis was not hatred against the terror regime. It was hatred like among gangsters. Hitler promised us to win the half of the world, and he asked us to help him, and so we have done. And now we have nothing. We have only our closest.
The collapse of Nazi government had left a vacuum. The advancing troops were politically innocent, and methods were rough and ready.
The Burgermeister, the first one you meet, he'd have his sash on, the badge of office, and he would inform us that he was not a Nazi, the town council was not, and we would probably round them all up and ship them out because we knew we had all the Nazis. You put soldiers with townspeople, and after the first couple of hours of a small amount of tension, when both parties realized that the other was not going to stab them suddenly, we'd find ourselves swapping a hardtack or chocolate for a cooked meal by one of the German families. And they in turn would show us family pictures, not uniform ones. And then you'd find a GI showing his family to them. And it's funny how the feeling could change so rapidly.
Some woman came to me, in addition to trying to offer me her own services, she was trying to obtain something else, and I looked at her. And I was feeling particularly mean that day. My father was sick, and the Red Cross had given me information through cable, and my younger brother-in-law had been killed in Germany, and the word just come to me, and I was about ready to tear anyone apart anyway with my own two hands. And she said to me, and I said, you know, in desperation almost, I said, look, don't bother me. You know, you're dealing with a Jew. You don't want to have anything to do with me. And she looked at me and she said, aber Sie sind ein weißer Jude, which you can translate, but you are a white Jew. And I did everything to restrain myself and just belting her right in the mouth.
The camps were overrun. Many Germans had known of them. Others had preferred not to know. Now they were forced to see. In one place, the mayor and his wife went home and hanged themselves. This is Buchenwald.
Jawohl. Jawohl. Was sollen wir tun? Rücken wir aus?
Those who had survived deportation, slave labor, selection for the death camps, starvation, were from every country in Europe, of all callings, of many religions, many political faiths. Some turned on their oppressors. Allied prisoners were freed. German soldiers went into captivity. Displaced persons, ordinary Germans, prisoners of war, passed on the roads and had nothing to say to each other. Germany was an ant-heap some giant had kicked to pieces. Here and there, looting, brief opportunities to celebrate the collapse of the system. The victors had their own views on law and order. Some property was still sacred.
April 45, Berlin was more ruins than a town. Mainly in the center of Berlin, one couldn't find almost no building which was still intact. But it was my wish to have the Berlin Philharmonics having a concert the last time. I knew that it would be my last concert for a long time, perhaps forever. And I invited friends and as much people as possible to go in. We were sitting there in our coats because there was no heating, it was cold and it was shivering. And in this atmosphere of destruction and misery, the concert started, and we started with the last part of the Götterdämmerung.
Hitler no longer made public appearances. More and more he withdrew to his underground headquarters beneath the Imperial Chancellery, the bunker.
When I came back from this concert for the military conference, we came in the bunker, and Hitler was almost out of his mind, and Goebbels was already there, and Hitler showed to us the wire they just received of the death of Roosevelt, and Goebbels was jumping up and saying, that's it, now we have it, got it, and now I think everything will turn to the better.
In the east, over railway lines converted to the broad Russian gauge, the Russian command was piling up vast supplies of material. 6 armies were involved. Their object? To smash the German forces on the approaches to Berlin and take the capital of Nazi Germany. On the 75th anniversary of Lenin's birth, the 16th of April, 1945, the massed artillery opened fire.
My heart was, was going smaller, and I get very anxious because I knew that the attack began.
The first barrage was less effective than Zhukov had hoped. The Germans were still secure in their second line of defense. In the center of the front, opposite Berlin, there were 400 guns to the mile to open a way for the assault tank. The Red Army was over the Oder, reinforcing and breaking out of its bridgehead. The armored columns pushed ahead against desperate resistance.
Some of our young boys, they jumped out of the hordes, had their Panzerfaust, and they were shooting to the tanks, and it destroyed all the 4 tanks, and the others were shooting with their guns and killed all the Russian soldiers. And the Russian must have been before in a magazine or in a factory, in a sweet factory, because they had all the arms full of sweet and chocolate. Everybody in our unit was 15 and 16, and they are running onto the street for the chocolate.
In the west, it was a different story. Sidestepping pockets of the enemy, the Allied columns moved east.
You could pick up the telephone in those days and ring up the next village. There's still German officers. Say, hello, what's happening down there? And one of the almost moved on a dreamlike and unreal situation. Towns and villages flew by, no resistance at all, normal countryside, no damage at all. And every day one said to oneself, now surely this can't go on. And I thought of one's own survival after all this gradually became when one did run into any sort of determined resistance. To me it was a matter of the heart. What are these, how dare these people prolong the agony anymore? And the other half is a darn nearly blue fact.
Ulzum, a little town in northern Germany, 30 miles short of the Elbe. Here, the Germans did stand and fight. There was an edginess now, fingers quick on the trigger. Their opponents were elite troops. It was a 4-day battle with considerable losses and many civilians.
Achtung, Feindpanzer!
Mostly the Germans surrendered thankfully enough. Their main aim, to go into captivity with the Anglo-Americans rather than with the Russians on whose land they inflicted such losses. Desperately they strove to reach safety in the west. Ruhr pocket, over 300,000 men of Army Group B were surrounded and forced to surrender. The Western Allies had achieved their main objective, the destruction of the German land.
Erst in
It wasn't until the first half of April that he retired to the bunker, because the air raids were getting worse and more frequent.
Der Bunker war so eingeteilt.
The bunker was divided up in such a way that in the lower area there was a military conference chamber with an anteroom which led to Hitler's study, wet room, bedroom, their office room, and also a room, bathroom.
There were some women in Hitler's former life who were important, but I think since during the last time there was nobody as near and as close to him like Eva Braun. She loved him really. Then he came surprisingly to Berlin when she arrived. Hitler tried to seem angry, but he wasn't successful. His eyes were so full of joy, and he was obviously so happy that she was there that nobody tried to send her back.
The Russians were now firing on Berlin itself. Their forward troops already in the outskirts, fighting their way from street to street.
So came his birthday, the 20th of April, and there came the congratulations, and everybody shook him his hand and wished him the best. And it was all very depressed. It was not a birthday. When the official part was over, it was time to dance. But even now, she invited some people to go upstairs to her little living room, and one found a record. He played a song like to dance, music. And so we sat around the table and tried to forget our miserable situation. And there was no joking, and everybody drank and it was a very artificial sort of gayness.
After that, there was another conference. It was getting so that we would have luggage ready for a possible move to the Berghof in Berchtesgaden.
Auf den Berchtesgaden anzuziehen.
He refused absolutely and said, no, I have to position here. And this is the first time that he ever mentioned the possibility that we could not win. That he mentioned the possibility of defeat.
I remember the April 20th, 1945. That was the birthday of Adolf Hitler. And in the radio there was a speech of Joseph Goebbels. And he said Berlin will remain German and Vienna will be German again. And my mother said, God thanks, we will win the war. And I said, Mother, you were wrong, and it's terrible, but I'm quite sure the war is over and we lose the war. And my mother said, this hour, Goebbels will tell us a lie.
erwischt! Da vorne sind sie!
Ein Trupp soll links raus und sie mit Granaten raustreiben!
Wir gehen nämlich in Deckung! Feindbischof! Rechts! Wir brauchen mehrere Waffen! Sanitäter!
Бои в Берлине были очень тяжелыми.
The battle of Berlin itself was extremely difficult. It had to be taken street by street, house by house. Some of them 9 and 10 stories high, and there were lots of these houses.
Стояли уж коробки этих домов. И фашисты...
The fascists held out on every floor. They had also set up barricades in every street. They converted the main buildings into strong points against us.
Für den ist der Krieg gelaufen! Ich hab ihn!
This evening, we just visited my mother. You know, she was very crying because she thought maybe I'm dead or something. And it was late in the evening and we wanted to sleep there. But the man of the house said it's impossible. You can't sleep here because the Russian, they're not far from here. If they arrive here by night and they see you here with guns, so maybe they will shoot us. So we couldn't sleep there. We went over the street. There was a school, and we slept there.
On the 21st, we went on together into the outer ring of the suburbs of Berlin itself. The order of the day of our high command reverberated through the whole country. They were heard throughout the world. Our soldiers have broken Berlin.
Berlin!
The Russians had worked out their tactics in detail, using models of streets and buildings. Behind the apparent chaos of the street fighting lay a precise plan to encircle the city and strike at the center. Some of these troops had come all across Russia, through territory the retreating Germans had looted, burned, destroyed. Berliners, sheltering in their cellars, wondered what their fate would be at Russian hands.
Дети не были даже эвакуированы. И все это, так сказать, ютилось вот в этих подвалах.
Even the children had not been evacuated. They all lived in cellars.
Подвал и обращалась по-немецки.
I went into the cellars and remember most of all the repetition of this phrase.
Мною слышанное и запомнившееся мне, это...
When will this nightmare end?
Suddenly, on April 22nd, I think, yes, there he come out of the military conference with a totally stony face and dark, threatened eyes, and he called us to come to this little anteroom, and he sent for Eva Braun and for the secretaries and for the secretary of for the cook who was still in Berlin, who cooked for him.
Sunny, hier rüber!
And then he came in and said, with a monotone voice and so unkindly as we never have heard him speak to us, "Ladies, please pack your things at once. You have to go to the south. The last aeroplane starts in about an hour." And then was silent. "No," he said, it's all lost. There's no hope. You have to go. And then was a moment of absolute silence, and we stood like shocked, and suddenly Eva Braun made a few steps, went to Hitler and said, "But you know I don't leave you. I stay on your side. You know that. Don't try to send me away." And then Hitler did something very astonishing, what he never did, and nobody had ever seen such a kiss. He kissed her on her lips. And then it happened that the other girls, and me too, we heard us saying, we stay too.
The situation in the bunker was fantastic one. Really can't, unrealistic one. One really can't describe how the rooms went on and off like waves. Sometimes they were all exhilarating, and we were thinking, well, now the Western troops coming for release of Berlin. Goebbels was exclaiming the biggest decisions of the war Hitler just made. He is now determined to no more to fight against the West and only to the East. This will mean that the Western powers will join us in our fight against Russia. And such things happen every now and then, a few minutes after, everybody was speaking about suicide and how they are preparing it. Goebbels in details was saying how he will let his children be killed, which were already in the bunker.
After a few days, a telegram came from Goering, which said, "Mein Führer, no longer my beloved Führer, just my Führer. I know that you are now totally cut off and are no longer in possession of full freedom to command. According to the law of succession, I will now step into your position and will undertake to represent Germany both in internal and external matters. Yours, Goering." Hitler was so worked up over this. He sat in his chair and could not grasp it at first. This was added to by Bormann, who added fuel to the fire somewhat, so that Hitler then said, "To give me an ultimatum, that really is the end."
There came one of the men of the press office, and brought the news. He had heard it by radio from Reuters news agency that Himmler had negotiations with Graf Bernadotte for capitulation, and Hitler was very upset because he held Himmler for his most faithful paladin, and the most reliable one, and now he saw that also he had tried to betray him. He remembered suddenly that the poison which he had to use for himself were given to him from one of Himmler's staff, and he mistrusted that it may affect. Perhaps Himmler tried a dirty trick and gave him something that would only make him unconscious, so that he transported bills out and deliver them. And to test this, he ordered a doctor to try to test this poison dog. So he this next Eva Brown stood next to him, and Blondie died very promptly.
A tiny handful of German anti-Nazis. The Russians came as
we suddenly saw the Gestapo. During the night, the whole prison was taken over to normal prison. Old men, often guys. And when we saw that, many of the uniforms had put away. We said, now when the Russians take over, you are the men. Not me. They were very, they said, no, we can't do that. Tonight, the Gestapo will come back. And then we made, in the afternoon of Tuesday, we made an agreement with them and said, look, we will put out ourselves, we the prisoners, some guards on the roof and observe the coming near of the Russian front. And in the minute we hear Russian gunfire, shelling, then you let us, they say, all right. When the door was opened in the prison, there was with us a Jewish Russian doctor who was in concentration inmate of Sachsenhausen, the famous. He, I don't know by what reason, was a month ago was brought by the Gestapo to our prison to do the most dirty jobs in the prison all the time. And we couldn't contact him much, but we knew him, of course. Then he stood there on the street and where to go? The Russian. And I said, my mother-in-law will feed you. You come in our basement. And he went with me. When the first units of the Russians came 2 days later, he met addressing them in Russian. Here are all anti-fascists in this basement.
When the Russian came in there, we found, at least we found the first took away our watches of course, and they were very cautious. You would understand that they took away things they liked, but they behaved very businessmen. They stayed in this house here, lived in this room 3 or 4. Was the Chancellery, but it was still alive and fighting. We went out and did their job and came back 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sharp. They asked me now to play the piano and give them a little tune, and then we drank together, we sang.
Suddenly we saw the first Russian soldiers. They knocked at our door, came in and were very kind. Said to my mother and to me there were German soldiers in the house or asked for weapons. And then they left. But the next Russians were quite different. One of them raped me and other inhabitants of the house.
The women who were living next door were killed and were taken to bury them because the shelling was still going on. When the Russians came, they asked us, where are you? So I had the trick, found the trick to take them to these two dead bodies, open the cupboard, said, this is my problem here, I can't supply you with any women. These are the only two women we knew here, which we had. And the Russians kneeled down, some of them, and made the cross, and said little prayers, which was very astounding, and got up again and kissed me, because they thought I was winning on them, and gave me presents, gave me cigarettes, gave me bread, clapped my shoulder, went off again, and got what they wanted properly. The next house or the next street.
Every night time I used to go home to see my mother and get something to eat and some cigarettes and so, because we didn't get any food at the time. And my mother was every night she was very lucky to see me again, naturally. And my mother asked me, also other people from our house, take your uniform out, stay here and don't go back to the fight. Always I said, no, I can't do it. I couldn't stay at home
Zhukov called the Battle of Berlin one of the most difficult battles of the war. It cost the Russians over 100,000 men. Total German losses are unknown.
Storming of Berlin continues. The encircling ring round the whole city and round the center of Berlin itself is drawn tighter and tighter. Only a few hundred yards separate us from the viper's nest of Hitler.
Political testimony, and I must confess that I was at first